We are living in a time of revolution. As energy and optimism flow from the west to the east, our world is changing. The balance of power that defined planet Earth for centuries is shifting, and the world of tomorrow will be very different than the world of today.
Asia is on the move, Asia is growing, and that's one reason so many people from around the world are flocking to Asia's cities.
I think this is the time of the Asian tiger. Thailand's a big tiger, Cambodia coming up, Laos, Vietnam. You know, everything is opening up in this region.
As the economies out here grow, as Americans become more familiar with the opportunities, they're going to be out here. And that will lead, I think, very, very naturally to increased and enhanced trade agreements.
I think the realization that Asia is a booming, building marketplace dawned on many decision makers early on already, and corporate strategists started to invest in places such as China, not to exploit cheap labor, but to build markets and to have a presence for the future.
Whether it's banking, investments, agriculture, Asia is providing opportunities unlike any other region in the world at this time.
This is Asia's time. This is Asia Rising. This TV series is about change. It's about tracking the world's most dynamic region, and it's about understanding how this will affect your life. 60% of the world's population wakes each day in Asia. They go to school, to work, they shop, and how they live their lives will forever change how you live yours. This is why I'm taking a multi-year journey to track the opportunities and the optimism of Asia. This is once again the center of the world. From offices of power to a local cafe, throughout futuristic cities to ancient villages, we'll meet the people that are changing our world for the better. Because the story of Asia today and tomorrow is a positive one, it's about transformation. And while there will be problems along the way, Asia has demographics, enthusiasm, and economic fundamentals on its side. It will meet the challenges head-on. If the 20th century was America's, then 21st century belongs to Asia.
There is so much focus on Southeast Asia these days. One reason is that this is a part of the world that's growing unlike any other. When people talk of Asia, in many ways, they're imagining a single entity. But people today need to realize that Asia is so diverse. From the Caucasus region in the far west to the Pacific Island nations in the east, Asia is a mix of so many different cultures, so many different religions, so many different really ways of life.
East Asia is the most diverse region in the world. You have countries like China, 1.3 billion. Per capita GDP is close to 5,000. You have countries like Japan, a couple hundred million. Its income level is like the United States, $45,000 per person. Indonesia, a couple hundred million, but their per capita GDP is around 4,000. You have small countries like Laos, Cambodia. You have fairly significant countries, Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, countries which range in population from 20 to 60 million, and from middle income to low income. So you have probably the most diverse region in the world. And they're growing, in general, as a group, they've been growing very rapidly.
How does an Asian country grow? Asia's history has been dominated by increased use of trade. That has meant more opportunity, more jobs, as countries have exported more and more products from Asia to around the world.
Business is seen as the way out. Asian countries were among the first ones to embrace export-led growth early on. And many Asian economies have been what you could call banking on the private sector, so systematically investing in business-led growth with a heavy emphasis on export orientation. Enormous steps forward have been made. Many countries continue to have relatively high growth rates. Major changes are still underway.
Well, I think the most interesting aspect of East Asia, and people try to simplify it by calling it as China rising. I mean, China's been growing at double digits for 3 decades. But China's rise is really part of a more broader story. East Asia as a whole, over the last several decades, has become what I would call the most dynamic region of the world. And the reason why is that they've collaborated, they've become more economically integrated. There is a new production sharing process which characterizes the strength of East Asia. What is the production sharing process? Take the iPod. Every American knows what the iPod is. The iPod is composed of about a dozen components. All those components are produced throughout East Asia and even in the United States. Then they are all exported to China, and then they're assembled in China. So the $650 iPad coming into the United States comes from China, it says made in China, but only 5% of that iPad actually is made up of labor coming from China. The other 95% are components coming from Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, the United States, and Malaysia. And this is true for the Dell computers, it's true for the TV sets. This is the production sharing network. And why is this production sharing network so extraordinary, so exceptional? Well, it's allowed every country, whether you're Cambodia, Thailand, Malaysia, or Indonesia, the Philippines, or China, or South Korea, or Taiwan, to specialize, to have economies of scale, and then this huge assembly plant in China is able to put all this together, turn around very quickly, and then you have this extraordinarily efficient logistics and shipping system in East Asia, which allows it to move it to the United States and to Europe. And we've never seen anything quite like this anywhere in the world, not even in Europe, and certainly not in Latin America or Africa or other parts of the world. And this has made East Asia the most productive region over the last several decades.
I think this is a really exciting time for not just for U.S. business, but for the United States and many other countries across Thailand and Southeast Asia. And if you look at the business engagement, you look at Southeast Asia, this is a huge potential market, a very young market, a very dynamic economic area, and again, a very tech-friendly environment. So people, for example, if you're talking about American business, American product, consumers across Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, they already know what's in a Gap store before they've decided what Gap t-shirt to buy. They've gone online, they've seen it. They know what US movies are coming as they're connected. They're posting Facebook pictures of themselves at events. So I think for American business, this is a huge opportunity and a very exciting one.
There's a huge opportunity investing in emerging markets in general and Asia in particular. So this shift of investment attitude, it's not about primarily cheap labor or accessing natural resources. It's about building markets for the future. And for that, you need a presence there, because going global ultimately means being local everywhere. And if you want to have a presence in China, you better set up a subsidiary in China, if possible, with a strong local partnership that is sensitive to the local needs and priorities. And currently, the emerging middle classes in many Asian markets are actually so big that already they're world leaders. Automobiles, for example, China is #1 consumer now. On the IT side, something similar is happening. And that has brought a huge shift about in the global marketplace. Leading global brands now set up research and development institutes in emerging markets, something unheard of 10 years ago. Research and development used to be the ultimate holy grail that was protected in the domestic market where the company was incorporated initially. But in an era of global interdependence, corporations set up also research and development in places where there's supply of young engineers, where there's a future market, where one needs to understand the trends of the future. And these are indeed fundamental changes.
We defined Southeast Asia as a production base for global market. And therefore, we do have 6 manufacturing factories or companies in Thailand. But now, Southeast Asia became consumption base, means consumer market, because the middle income group, so-called middle income group, defined $5,000 to $35,000 spending a year. Those are middle income group, increasing a lot in Southeast Asia. Those ones be able to buy air conditioners, able to buy cars. So our business, particularly air conditioner business, is growing, and next 5 to 10 years will definitely grow more and more.
The middle class is growing. Quality of life is the goal of the expanding middle class with their purchasing power. So they are willing to spend more to make life easier, to live in comfort, education, health, logistics, transport, construction, food processing. These things are important to the rising middle class in East Asia in general.
East Asia is experiencing a movement of people. Some countries are getting a younger population. Some countries are getting an aging population. The middle class is seen as rising. The middle class is politically active in some countries, but not in others. And there's some culture and historical reasons why that's the case. People have looked at China, for example, and they've started to ask about the rising middle class. Not only is this rising middle class leading to demand for consumer goods and product lines that come in from Europe and the United States, not only is it asking for more services, but a lot of people are also saying, is this going to change the social and political makeup of China? Is it going to be, for example, more politically active? Is there going to be a stronger movement for democracy?
Urbanization is still the big shift that is happening. It's not yet complete. 60% of the population already living in cities. The trend will increase further. The predictions are very clear. The demand is enormous for city improvement, for urban investments, and it's still going very, very strong. Will there be an end? It has been predicted by economists many times, but if you look at the huge number of people still living in poverty in rural areas, trying to find a better life in the cities, it's not difficult to foresee that this trend of urbanization and with it coming the infrastructure investment component will continue for a decade, if not two.
East Asia as a group has generally prospered. It's the only region which has managed to remain or grow very rapidly. There is a lot of movement of labor, migrant workers within the region. Now that's a new phenomenon. You have people from Indonesia going to Malaysia and Thailand, people in the Philippines going everywhere. You have people from Vietnam going to South Korea. You have Thais and Vietnamese coming into China now across the borders in huge numbers, not yet formally recognized. You have Singaporeans who are, of course, moving around in a more traditional business sense. So one of the things I think that it is going to be different in the future is the tremendous movement of people within the region.
Like most developing economies, has the problem of low birth rates. Actually, right now, Korean population is shrinking because we have a negative birth rate. In the recent 2-3 years, the government has focused a lot of efforts in reversing that trend, and hasn't had much success yet. One area where we have a little bit of hope is immigration. We've got a lot of migrant workers flowing into Korea, from the surrounding Southeast Asian areas like Vietnam and Bangladesh and India and many other countries, low-wage countries, where migrant workers come to Korea to work and then settle down, and many of them stay and create families here, and so that contributes to population growth in a small sector yet. But for the future, that's probably one of the ways we can avoid, becoming a negative growth country.
I think it is true that the models are blending and mixing. One is the demographic swap that is happening, and large corporations proudly today have not only a workforce that is very multicultural, but also at board level, it's not uncommon anymore that you have all regions of the world represented.
People get ideas from around the world. It's amplified when you go study or work in another country for a few years. You spend time studying in the United States. And by the way, we welcome that. The advent of having foreign students in the United States makes university life in the United States richer. You broaden students in the United States' knowledge. If you have Thai students in your class at a university in the United States, you learn about Thailand. You learn about different cultures. You learn about the way things are done, the kind of decisions people make, the issues they face. And I like to think for those students who come to the United States, they get new ideas. They get thoughts on how you solve different kinds of problems. They get exposed to new kinds of food and new kinds of culture. And then they bring that back home.
Well, the flow of students from East Asia, great numbers to the United States, but also to Europe, it's been going on for decades. And some countries like Taiwan, practically everybody who graduated from college went to graduate school in the United States. At one time when they surveyed the cabinet in Taiwan, they found that 80% of them had PhDs, and all of them got their PhDs in America. So that just shows you the extent of what I call the student aspirations in getting training or having some access to the culture and traditions of America and in Europe. And this is going on throughout East Asia. And before it was graduate school. Now you see increasing numbers going even for high school, and they're going for colleges, and even some of the senior leaders in China are sending their kids to the United States. So this desire for Western education is very, very strong. Now it's exceeding what I would call what people expected. Before, they thought it was technical education that they would want, or validation of their credentials. But now people are going because they think that the West is more creative. I mean, Asians are very strange. They always have the highest test scores. They do these international exams, and they show that Asians are the best in math or the best in science. And so the West is very, very sort of like apprehensive or worried that they're no longer competitive. Yet the Asians basically say, we got a problem. Are too much rote learning? Are people not creative? They have to have more flexibility. They have to be challenged. So they then send them to the West, the same West which is basically saying our school system is failing. So depending on the minds of the person, it may be failing or it may be the greatest opportunity in the world. But regardless, there's this very dominant, strong feeling in East Asia, and it's certainly true in China, that if you want your students to prosper in the world, and they have to prosper in a more complex society, then you go to the West, and where in the West they want to go to the United States. So where in the West they're worried about the quality of their education, whether they're losing the competitive edge, they still have this tremendous capacity to produce very, very innovative and creative people. What the West has not been able to do actually is to translate that creativity and innovation into rapid growth and broad sharing of the prosperity for everyone. One of the things we've learned in life actually, that being innovative and creative doesn't necessarily mean that your society grows well and does well. The same was true in Japan. They're the most innovative country in society. They produce a huge range of products, but they weren't able in many cases to figure out how to make money with those products or how that translated into a growth for the country. Now the South Koreans today, in my view, is the example of countries which have been able to manage both. To be both technologically very innovative, but also translate this into a strategy so the whole country prospers. So I think 10 years from now, people will start writing about South Korea as the model. And there was a time when Japan was a model. Some people are looking at China as the model. I actually think the model for developing countries that will be written about 10 years from now will be South Korea.